Yo, what's good everybody? It's me, Down Weeb here, back with a highly requested part for part 2 of What If Asta Was in Fairytail. We gotta change a few things because there's some ideas in the comments I really liked, so I'm probably gonna go I'm just retconning that now just because I thought it was a good idea. The main one is, here, I'll put the comment on screen right now. Anyway, yeah, it was, so basically, if you guys remember, if you've watched Fairytail, Natsu stole the paper assignment for the S-rank mission to go to Galuna Island. And because the books that I said were related to Zareth, it'd probably be S-ranked. So now I have, in the retcon, now Asta has stolen the quest to go and to get rid of the Zareth books. Nothing else has changed though, and now we get back into the story right now. Asta's greeting his friends as well as rivals, Gray and Natsu, as they had now finally made it back to Fairytail. Natsu now having a strange new add-on to the guild. Lucy would be excited to join the famous Fairytail guild, as she rushes around meeting all the members who she'd seen in Sorcerer Weekly many times before. She then would come across Asta, who she actually hadn't ever seen before. Asta would introduce himself to Lucy, and Lucy would say that her name's Lucy. Asta would say it's nice to meet her and would move on. Now, Natsu, Gray, and now Asta are arguing with each other, while Natsu and Gray are both heating up and freezing, while Asta himself is just trying to get a word in edgewise, feeling still a little bit underappreciated for his strength and how hard he's worked. This is when Elfman comes by, and Asta and him would go off and have a drink together as they laugh about what Asta stole his mission for. Makarov would be very upset with Asta for stealing such a high-ranked quest without him having any magic, and Asta would say sorry, but that he thinks it was worth it since he got to see some cool stuff happen anyway. Gramps would be more curious about this, as Makarov is still upset, but more so happy that his adopted child is okay. Asta would show his right hand to Gramps, and as Makarov looks down to look into the center of his palm, there would be a 5-leaf clover etched into his hand in black. This is when he decides that he'll have Levy take a look at it to see if Asta had gotten himself cursed or something. Levy, unfortunately, was at the time out on a job, and so next time she would come back, they would have him be checked. This is when Romeo would come barging into the room and say that he was wondering where his dad was. Romeo's dad, Macau, by the way, is, if you didn't know, the older wizard who can use purple flame magic. Natsu, who never grew up without a father, as well as Asta, would both volunteer to go look for him, especially Asta, who still wants to prove himself. Natsu would convince Gramps that he'd be fine as long as Asta came along with him, and that those two could go look together. Lucy would insist on coming with as well, as Natsu dragged her along. Hiro, as well as Happy, would then head off as they head towards Mount Hakabe, to where Macau was sent on his actual quest. As they get towards the job area and they start climbing the mountain, Asta's completely fine walking through the cold along with Natsu, while Lucy's freezing as she gets inside of her clock spirit in order to keep herself warm. She would be shivering as she sees the two outside, barely wearing anything at all, being completely fine. Asta and Natsu were both very physically adept, as they had both been training for a long time, with Natsu's fire magic being especially much more suited to this than Asta should be. Natsu would look over and ask Asta if he's really okay in this cold, and ask if he needs some flames to heat him up. Asta would basically grit his teeth and tell Natsu that he's doing just fine, while inside he's really thinking, "Oh my god, it's cold." Asta would then continue walking forward, as they'd eventually find a cave to where they had heard of these mountain beasts living. As the whole gang gets inside the cave, they would see a almost white-as-snow Yeti-looking being, which would immediately turn around and begin to try and take Lucy away from them, as, if you know the lore of Fairytail, they like human girls. Natsu would fall for the trick just like in the original, and Asta would be left to defend Lucy from this Yeti. As Asta would be going hand-to-hand combat against it, he'd be gripping his hands with the beast as his small, short body would actually somehow be holding out, with Lucy completely surprised as how he is managing to do this. As he's holding out, he's feeling his strength wane, and just as he's about to pass out from the exertion, he would inevitably push it over as Natsu comes back up and saves the day, with now Asta feeling his breath become even more heavy. As they defeat the Yeti, suddenly Mikao would appear as he had been transformed into one and taken over by it. Mikao would thank them and think that it was unfortunate they had taken out 25 of them, but the last one had popped up from behind and taken him over. Now the 5 of them, being happy, sitting on Natsu's shoulder, would say, "Aye, sir, let's head back to Magnolia." All of them would head back to Magnolia, where we see a heartfelt reunion between Romeo and his dad. Lucy would be taking a break now as she sighs after that job, heading back to her apartment downtown Magnolia. As she walks into her house, she would then see Natsu laying there on her bed, doing push-ups with Happy there. Asta would be back at the guild as he meets up with his Gramps, Makarov. "Hey Gramps, did you see that? I finished 2 jobs. Well, one of them all by myself, and the other one I did with a team. Isn't that cool?" This is when Makarov would smile, and as he and Asta are actually fairly close in height, which always makes Asta feel self-conscious because he still is a little bit angry about his height in this timeline. Gramps would tell Asta he's doing a pretty good job, and then tells him that if he wants, he can give him one other job as long as he goes with Natsu again, as well as that new Lucy girl. They seem to be making a very good team. This is when Asta would sigh and say fine, saying that it's alright as long as he gets to go on a job of some sorts. Asta would then take the job as had been sent, and he would take the job called Destroy the Book, apparently with a high-risk, high-reward factor. He would take the job and before Natsu could and actually meet up with Natsu, Happy, and Lucy, saying that he was thinking they could take this job together. Lucy would agree, saying it's a pretty good sum of money, as they decide to go meet up with this Kabi fellow. They would all have to get on a train, and just as they're about to step aboard, Asta would turn around with a smirk as he looks to Natsu and says, "What, afraid of trains?" He would then stop on the train with no problem, as he sits down in his seat next to Lucy. Natsu would, as soon as he sits down on the train, would almost immediately lose his composure, as he begins laying on the seat like he's going to die from motion sickness. Lucy would then say that the train hasn't even started moving yet, and Asta would start laughing. Lucy would ask what's going on, and Asta would then tell her about how, ever since they were little, Natsu's always had this problem, where getting on anything moving besides Happy flying around with him would basically cause him to go all sick like this. After several hours of Natsu in pain, they would finally arrive at the village where Kabi was staying, along with Duke Everlew, the person they were trying to take this book from. As they get into the mansion where Kabi and his wife are sitting, they would immediately greet the wizards, with Asta included. Asta would then tell them that they're ready for the job, and they would say that this book was something that had been created and caused him much grief, and that they were to destroy it immediately. They would all agree as they head towards Duke Everlew's mansion, thinking about the new flyer that they had for looking for maids. Lucy would originally be dressed up as the maid, as she decides to go and apply for the job, when suddenly Virgo would come out of the gate, looking like a huge giant, causing Lucy to grow a large sweat drop dripping down the side of her head. Lucy would look up at this giant, as the maid would look down, saying that the Duke, their master, has no interest in someone like her. Duke Everlew would agree, saying that she was ugly, which would basically cause Lucy to get set off as she walks away, storming off, thinking that she and her good looks could never be deterred by some old fat guy like him. As she goes back to meet with the others, they decide they'll just have to break in then, as Asta and Natsu would take care of that. Asta would, using his bare strength, was about to strike the column with his hand. As his right hand is about to slam into the column, suddenly the column disappears as though it had never been there at all. He looks at his hand, seeing a dark red energy fading away quickly into the center of his palm. Natsu would immediately sense this as he looks over to Asta, wondering what the heck that was. They'd lock eyes for a second, thinking in their heads that they'd talk about it later. They walk through this hole, and immediately as Asta passes through it, along with Lucy, the hole would seal back up again, seemingly by magic. Apparently, the walls of this place are made by magic so that the holder can actually use some sort of drilling magic, Lucy thinks as she looks around. As the team walk into this entrance, they would suddenly see the 2 brothers, one with the frying pan and the other one without. Natsu and as well as Asta would tell Lucy to go find the book and that they can take care of these guys. Asta would immediately tell Natsu to pick him up and throw him, as Asta would be picked up by Natsu and blasted with fire behind him, slamming towards the one with the frying pan. As Asta is heading towards him, he comes in with a spinning kick, slamming the iron pan out of his hands, and begins fighting physically with his physical strength against the actual wizard. As this person is actually impressed that a wizard could have such incredible strength for them being mercenaries, Asta would actually be overpowering him. With Natsu fighting off the other brother, the two of them can pull their weight rather well. Natsu would scream, "Fire Dragon, roar!" as he burns the other brother to a crisp. The flames begin to grow as they head towards the other brother, while Asta's still fighting him. Natsu's eyes would quickly narrow as he says, "Asta, get out of the way!" Asta quickly turns, the flames are about to engulf him as well as the mercenary. A burst of dark energy pulses out of Asta's hand as he holds his hand up to protect himself from the flames. The flames immediately push around as Asta is seemingly deterring them, heading as they fly towards the mercenary brother, knocking him out as they both fall to the ground. Asta and Natsu would look at each other with surprise as Natsu's flames never miss. This is when Asta would look at his hand and see that dark energy again fading back into his palm. He decides he'll need to experiment with this later, as they still have a mission to do, as they need to get their job done. Natsu and Asta would meet up with Lucy as they see that she's actually fighting with Duke Everlew. Virgo would come out and try to distract the two. However, something goes wrong. As soon as Asta taps into that power he can feel in his right hand, he begins to grow it across his hand as he sees a handle being to pull out of his hand in his forearm. Natsu would turn around and sees the tip of the blade of what we would be known as the Demon Slayer's sword begins to come out of Asta's hand. Asta would jab his hand towards this maiden, or the maiden Virgo, and seemingly as soon as the sword touches with her actual spirit form, spirits which are made purely out of concentrated magic, she is instantly summoned back to the celestial world. Both Natsu and Asta jump into the portal as they hold their breath, getting pulled all the way through to the other side. Once they get through, they see Lucy covering her head while Happy is trying to defend her, with Duke Everlew flying around using his drilling magic. "Natsu, it's all on you!" Natsu would begin to power up as he uses flames. He then says that it's over, Duke Everlew, as he uses his Fire Dragon Iron Fist, pummeling Duke Everlew as he goes flying out and is knocked out. Lucy thanks the two of them as Natsu would then look at Asta and tell him that he's got some stuff that he needs to work on, smiling, telling Asta that he's finally got his magic that he wanted. Asta would smile as he tells Natsu thanks, saying that he's been working hard ever since back then. We have a short flashback of Natsu and Gray and Erza all working on their magic, while Asta sits in the corner feeling alone. This is when Erza would come over and help Asta up and tell him that he should do something by himself too, saying that if he's going to just sit there, he might as well train. This gives him the idea to do his physical training of Elf. With Elfmen, they begin to do their training back then. We snap back to the present as we then see Asta as well as Lucy and Natsu heading back to the mansion where Kabi is. They would use the book and decipher it, with Lucy explaining to Kabi that this was a gift from the great author that was his father, and that this shouldn't be burned as it was a treasure, his last book he had ever written for his only son. Kabi would decide not to burn the book as he hugs it, telling all of them that thank you so much for saving this for him. Natsu would then tell them that he doesn't need a reward, as they all walk away, with Lucy being in shock. Asta would then ask Lucy if she could tell. Natsu nods. That house wasn't theirs, they would both say, as they look back, saying that they had rented it out. Lucy would say, "What?" Natsu and Asta would explain that they both smelled it when they got in, that the scent that this was a new house, like they didn't live in it. It smelled like it was rented or something. They would then head back to Fairytail, with Lucy wondering how she's going to make up the money for her rent. As they get back to Fairytail, they take a break on the way back, as they're lying in the grass. Happy would suddenly smell something as he tells Natsu there's something in the bushes over there. Asta would hear it too as he hears a rustling. Natsu and Asta would jump around each side as they then jump on the bush, and suddenly we hear a cold, freezing yelp as Asta comes jumping out of the brush with a cover of ice all across his face. He quickly brushes it off as Natsu shoots flames at him, covering him. "What are you doing in the bushes half naked, you stupid perv?" This is what Natsu would say, as Gray would get up and say, "Who are you calling a pervert?" He would then realize his clothes are off as he pulls them back on, telling him that they should ignore that. Asta would immediately get into the fight, as all three of them bicker and quarrel. Gray would stop fighting after a while, as he then said that he was actually looking for something. This is when three of the bandits would come rushing out of nowhere, as they realize Happy's been taken. Happy's sitting on a stick and is about to be burned for a delicious meal, when the three bandits are found by the Fairytail wizards. Asta, with Natsu at the forefront, would charge down as they defeat them and kick them back. This is when they hear that the Titan Erza would be coming back to Fairytail soon, and Natsu, Gray, and Asta would all shiver as they hug each other, thinking about the old days. Lucy would ask if this Erza was really so scary, and all three of them would nod as they begin shaking, thinking about a giant Tyrannosaurus Rex. Lucy would be freaking out as they head back towards the guild. As they all get back towards the guild and into the actual door itself, and they sit down, all three of them waiting nervously, they suddenly hear the large door open as large metal footsteps come walking in. Lucy swallows as she feels her heart beginning to beat faster. What is this? Does this Erza look like? This is when we see Erza Scarlet, walking with her beautiful red hair, walks into the guild with a large horn as she carries her cart of stuff behind her. She then turn to the three boys and then say, "I'm glad you three are all getting along." They all nod as she then decides to go report to Makarov. After a while, she then walked back to the three of them, saying that she has a job that she needs all of them to come with on. This one's going to be a big one, and it's going to be them having to take down a dark guild. If you guys want to see the next part for What If Asta Was in Fairytail, thank you for watching that. Make sure to hit the like button, comment down below what you thought, and subscribe to the channel for more. Sorry if I screw up a few names a few times. I'm getting used to writing scripts for this, so yeah. But anyway, yeah, I'll see all you guys later. The next part will be coming out eventually, and bye.